A factory whistle doesn't blow. It hisses like a creeper as a line of TNT crates clicks into place, and a bespectacled villager slams a redstone lever, sending a chorus of controlled pops down the assembly line. Welcome to the Industrial Revolution, Minecraft style, where combustion is a commodity, and every workshop smells faintly of gunpowder and ambition. It began with a small idea and a louder bang. Barnaby, a spectacled villager with soot-stained robes and a pencil behind his ear, sketched blueprints on a wooden lectern while shuffling through stacks of gunpowder receipts. He had watched furnaces and water wheels and thought, all of it is slow, what if fire did the heavy lifting? So Barnaby petitioned the village council, which met under a banner of oak planks and bureaucracy, and proposed a factory where redstone-powered switches set precise fuses, and TNT crates moved like obedient cattle along polished rails. The council clacked and murmured, and then, to everyone's surprise, voted yes, because the economy had been slow, and because the mayor had a soft spot for spectacle. Construction began with the kind of practical enthusiasm only found when planks can be replaced, and villagers can respawn. Scaffolds rose, rails were laid, and a chorus of pickaxes punctuated the horizon. At the center of the site stood the first prototype, a steel-framed hall with glass windows, 50 panes in the front, because optics are dramatic, and inside, a conveyor of chest carts waiting for the handshake that would make an explosion useful instead of lethal. Barnaby's cousin Mavis, who could weld an anvil while humming sea shanties, supervised the bluest of blueprints and kept a stack of emergency charcoal biscuits in her pocket. They tested safety by building sand blast tunnels and teaching chickens to duck when a crate detonated properly. Confetti of cobblestone rained down, and the geologists clapped. Within weeks, the town's skyline changed. Chimneys puffed pixel smoke, carts hissed instead of creaked, and the black market for spare fuses became a polite queue under a banner that read, "Buy local. Ignite carefully." The first production line made bricks because bricks always sell. Patrons watched as TNT compressed clay into perfect blocks with a satisfying pop. And local poets wrote sonnets about the smell of fired terracotta. Then came tinsmithing, then powered looms that stitched banners with reckless efficiency. Then the odd luxury of steam-imitating puffer boxes that did nothing but exhale dramatic plumes for the mayor's parties. The oddest invention, and the one that would make the newspapers, was the TNT loom. Looms so precise they could embroider tiny creeper faces onto bedsheets without detonating them. Barnaby loved the attention, but he loved the scale more. He began to imagine not just one factory, but a constellation of workshops, a network of scheduled bangs that synchronized to produce entire villages. He drew maps with dotted lines and arrows, plotting supply routes of TNT, coal for contrast, and the oddly entrepreneurial sheep who carried small flares for night deliveries. Word-spread merchants came from biomes away, eyes bright at the thought of faster planks, stronger glass, and the curious new adjective, TN Terra. Investors in enchanted hats whispered about dividends. Guilds negotiated safety tariffs. A chaplain in blocky robes declared a ritual blessing for fuses and welds, and sang, briefly, "Blessed be our bangs." Not everything was noble. A small movement of creeper rights activists protested outside the works with placards reading, "We go boom too," and containment, not containment. Barnaby, who had a soft spot for diplomatic theatrics, invited their leader, a ward of lime pixels named Pops, for tea and a demonstration of the newly calibrated safety latch. Pops sniffed the kettle, which hissed suspiciously, and said only, "Do not make me nostalgic." Then she watched a crate compress sand into a chimney, applauded, and accepted a pamphlet about union rules. Accidents were inevitably part of the story. A novice switchman once set off 3 crates in a row while sneezing, and a particularly embarrassed piglin painted his snout with soot for a week. Regulations followed, charts pinned to the factory wall, a ritual of counting matches before each shift, and a warning bell that sounded like a bassoon because someone thought it sounded distinguished. Meanwhile, the logistics of TNT supply spawned its own microeconomy. Farmers grew gunpowder flowers, librarians organized explosive codices, and a traveling salesman sold fuse polish that promised smoother burns. Trade caravans rearranged their routes to avoid accidental parades of primed crates, and children learned to play a new game, redstone hopscotch, which involved stepping only on unlit powder and reciting the names of safety inspectors. At night, the factory glowed like a mechanical moon workers smoked pixel pipes. Iron golems took turns as solemn night supervisors, and the distant hills echoed soft detonations like a lullaby of industry. With success came envy. Neighboring villages sent spies disguised as wandering traders who bought exactly one stick and left suspiciously with pockets full of soot. Barnaby responded with outreach programs, workshops teaching careful priming, evening lectures on ethical explosions, and a plaque that read, "We boom responsibly." Yet beneath the optimism lay complexity. TNT production required exotic ingredients, some mined from dangerous caverns, others grown under specific moonlight shaders, and all of it dependent on precarious supply chains. Barnaby started a ledger, detailed and obsessive, tracking fuses per guild, misfire rates, and even the average hiss per hour, because record-keeping is where revolution turns into an industry. Sometimes Barnaby admired the chaos. Sometimes he lay awake thinking of the breathless moment before a crate popped and imagined communities synchronized by engineered panic. He would watch the horizon and count the puffs like clock hands, proud and mildly terrified when the rhythm held. In the last week of Part 1, the factory's first convoy, 8 carts, a brass banner, and a vanguard of apprentices, rolled toward the next village with crates labeled for construction only and a brass drummer beating a heroic, slightly nervous cadence. The apprentices waved, children chased after the tail lights of lantern carts. The mayor blew a horn that squealed like an exhausted parrot. Barnaby touched his ledger, felt a tremor of pride, and then a distant ping echoed on his workbench, a message from the south. Shipment received. People curious. Keep safe. He exhaled, which in Minecraft means a gentle pixel gust, and looked toward the windows where the smoke stitched the sky. Mavis jangled the keys to the test furnace, winked, and said, "Tomorrow we build a second wing." Barnaby smiled, but his smile was thoughtful. Around him, the village pulsed with new rhythms and impossible choices. Outside, a child held a sparking toy and asked, "Will it always be like this?" Barnaby paused. The first TNT factory isn't built, it's detonated into existence. A single blocky boom, synchronized like a clock choir, and a cluster of wooden scaffolds collapses into an angular cathedral of soot and iron. The camera, if cameras in this world snapped like redstone eyes, pans over a landscape where every chimney is a TNT fuse and every piston pulse begins with a spark. Welcome back. The Industrial Revolution, pixelated, where coal is quaint and dynamite is doctrinator, our central character. Greta Gearbox, a square-shouldered villager with a leather apron, one redstone monocle, and a grin that looks like it was crafted out of slabs. She stands on a raised platform, soot streaking her cheek plate, watching a line of minecarts clank toward a receiving bay. Her workshop smells of gunpowder and caramelized stone. The air tastes faintly of ozone and toasted wool. Greta is both engineer and showrunner. She doesn't just build machines, she scripts their detonations like a conductor rehearsing Thunder A 20-second beat. Close-up on Greta's gloved hand, wiring a redstone clock to a row of TNT blocks. Sparks hop in pixel-perfect rhythm. There is a tiny whimsy in the way she ties a bit of string to the last block, superstition or ancient programming. A creeper forklift trundles by, its expression unreadable, its little cart loaded with gunpowder sacks. The soundtrack is a metronome of tiny explosions, each boop, repositioning gears, pushing belts, launching items along hoppers. The narrator's voice dips into authoritative documentary mode. Efficiency went up, soot went up, eyebrows went up. The factories here don't produce only iron or textiles. They make momentum. A steam engine in this universe would be polite, a TNT engine is theatrical. Imagine a rhythm: blast, settle, click, move. Pistons extend in a staccato ballet because each firing must be timed to the echo of the previous blast. Conveyor belts hop forward like startled frogs. Workers wear helmets reinforced with trapdoors. Safety briefings are 3 words long: duck, run, smile scene shift, the exterior of the first Blasterworks mill. It is a fortress of stone, lined with blast doors and proud chimneys that cough blocky smoke shaped like question marks. A sign swings, blast and spin proudly exploding since the Great Ignition. Tourists come by in wagons, polished cows, fashionably singed, taking selfies beside a statue of the first ignited TNT block, a monument with a tiny plaque. For progress and drama. Greta gives an offhand lecture to a stunned group of villagers. It's all about pulse frequency, she says, tapping the statue. A child asks, will it ever run out? Greta smirks, only when the universe forgets how to boom. Another beat. Inside, a production line for boomcloth, a fabric woven from creeper hair and gunpowder residue, praised for being both fashionable and alarmingly flammable. Machines called detonators stitch patterns by spraying heat and gentle blasts. Dialogues are rare and short. A foreman breathlessly whispers, too cozy, as a scarf ignites theatrically and emerges pre-ripped, trending instantly. The camera pans to a worker shaping a piston. A minecart arrives with an order labeled export. 5,000 booms. For export licenses, bureaucrats staple paperwork with TNT-tipped stamps. The absurdity is precise. This revolution reshaped daily life. Redstone laborers worked in shifts, timed by blast songs. Villagers commuted by blast drill. A series of TNT-powered launchers that gently lob passengers across rivers in cushioned arcs. Markets sell breakfast bangs, sugar-coated blocks that explode softly, releasing the aroma of toast. Children play a game called Tag Boom, where the tagger taps you with a tiny lit fuse before sprinting away. Everyone returning home missing a hat, but glowing with adrenaline. Small surprising twist. Creepers, once purely spontaneous detonators of annoyance, found employment as quality control inspectors. Their unique anatomy made them excellent at testing explosive tolerance. They would wander through assembly lines, chew on a suspicious seam, and if satisfied, emit a polite little hiss. Then, instead of villainy, they received pay in the form of blankets and discounted gunpowder. A museum displayed a portrait of a proud creeper wearing a tiny supervisor's cap. Tour guides said with a straight face, they used to be pests. Now they're a pensionied. Political life took on the cadence of periodic demolition. Town councils convened behind reinforced glass to vote on zoning. How many TNT stacks could be placed within 3 blocks of a school? Debates sounded like symphonies of careful disclaimers. We must ensure equitable boom distribution, a counselor intoned. Regulations appeared ludicrously logical. Boilers required a minimum of 2 lit fuses and a signed affidavit from a licensed igniter. Yet the black market of makeshift sparkers thrived in the alleys, knitting together a subculture of rogue tinkerers who welded tripwire hats and sold surprise party kits that guaranteed a small but tasteful explosion. Greta's personal life became a microcosm of the era. She fell in love with timing. She kept a notebook of detonations, documenting the exact intervals that coaxed the most delightful piston flutters. She had a pet, a tamed ghast with the temperament of an antique clock, which wafted through the rafters, belting a ghostly oh-ooh whenever a perfect detonation sequence occurred. One night, she wired a pattern she'd been refining for months, and as the choir of fuses answered, the ghast hummed in harmony. Greta laughed, a sound like clinking steel, and for a moment the entire mill felt like a living instrument twist. not everyone celebrated. Neighboring farmers complained that the vibrations made their beetroot grow thick and contradictory. Some claimed their sheep sprouted extra hooves. An activist group, the Gentle Tylers, marched with banners reading "Less boom, more bloom." Their leader, a pixelated old gardener named Miss Petal, held up a burnt flower and said in a voice that trembled like an old piston, "We miss the quiet." Greta listened, genuinely perplexed, and then scheduled a public demonstration where the factory would run at half-boom for the afternoon. It went poorly. Pistons misfired, a laundry line floated skyward, and a goose achieved brief but elegant flight. The gesture backfired into a spectacle, and attendance at Blasterworks tours spiked economically. TNT factories invented an entire lexicon. Boomshare prices rose and fell with the caloric value of explosions. Insurance companies wrote policies called aftershock annuities. Merchants specialized in debooming services, offering to neutralize old fuses with artisan patience. And somewhere, smugly precise, the Royal Guild of Redstoners published a manual, The Mechanics of Regulated Chaos, now a bestseller in every Blocky household. Greta's name appeared in the margins, scrawled in soot. She had become an idol and an inconvenient neighbor short comedic scene. Inspectors arrive unannounced. They wear helmets with tiny calendars to mark the exact week of inspection. One opens a clipboard, peers over its edge, and says to Greta, "We require your detonation calendar." Greta slides him a scroll that unfurls into a fireworks display of annotated fuses. His face, with eyebrows like little slabs, registers approval, bewilderment, and envy all at once. He stamps her paperwork with a rubber block that emits a small puff of smoke. Bureaucratic pomp meets pyrotechnics. By the end of part 2, the viewer should feel the hum of this new society in their blocky bones. Whole towns synchronized to blast beats. Small businesses tailoring to the economy of controlled chaos. Social customs rewritten by a world that lit fuses before breakfast. The Industrial Revolution here is not just a technological pivot, it's an aesthetic choice, a social rhythm, a cultural drumbeat. Greta Gearbox stands at the center of it all, soot on her cheek, a fuse between two fingers, eyes shining with the possibilities of calibrated catastrophe. She flips a switch, listens to the echo, and for a heartbeat wonders whether the world is better for the boom or simply louder. As the camera pulls back, Blasterworks exhaling a plume shaped suspiciously like a question mark, the narrator's tone softens into irony. Revolutions change how we move, how we sell, how we love, and sometimes they blow up the furniture. The next part will examine what happens when that sound meets the wider world. Export deals, diplomatic detonations, and the fragile diplomacy of neighbors who measure friendship in kilotons. A single match strikes the skyline, and 100 chimneys answer like a choir of blocky metronomes, and then everything politely detonates. The camera would tilt in a cinematic, block-shaped arc to reveal Professor TNT Spark standing on a soot-streaked balcony, goggles perched absurdly on his nose, watching rows of TNT-lit smokestacks cough out cubic steam. He is central, unlikely, and entirely convinced this is progress. Close up, his square jaw clenches, distant rumble of controlled chaos hums through the cobblestone street. The world smells of gunpowder and caramelized wool. This is where TNT-powered industry begins, with a man who likes to call explosions efficient persuasion cut to the first factory. A sprawling box of iron, brick, and redstone, all bolted together with optimism. Inside, gears clack in neat rectangles, pistons pump like stubborn hearts, and conveyors made of oak planks and a suspiciously happy minecart chain shuttle raw blocks toward the glowing maw. The TNT chamber. Sparks dance on copper rails. The scene flickers in warm orange light shadows stack in perfect cubes. A villager in a soot-streaked apron tosses in a block of ore, says something useful sounding, and a mild blast rearranges it into ingots. The villager wipes his brow with a pork chop and grins. "Work smarter," he says. Work louder, every beat of this new industrial drum is a visible, audible event. Where steam would have hissed in a human or a factory, TNT here announces itself with polite booms that are scheduled, audited, and occasionally fashionable. Factories publish timetables. 900, breakfast 915, safety briefing 930, synchronized detonation. Citizens wear earplugs made of wool and pride. Children clap at the hourly puffs, collecting sparkles like confetti. The soundtrack is a chorus of explosive efficiency. Pops, cracks, a soft metallic ding as an item is flung into a crate. The camera pans to a scoreboard. Operatives tally blasts per hour like sports fans tally goals. And it reads, productivity. 1 explosion per 3.5 blocks. Professor Spark becomes both engineer and evangelist. He gives impromptu lectures beneath a banner that reads TNT, for the people. He explains, in the tone of a kindly historian, how the old ways of furnaces and water wheels were quaint but slow. A cheesy slide flip shows a steam engine with googly eyes being outpaced by a smiling TNT block wearing a top hat. The crowd titter-snorts politely. A miner holds up a fragment of ore, and a brass band made of iron trapdoors plays a triumphant, slightly off-key tune. It simplifies supply chains, the professor declares, which is his formal way of saying we blow stuff up, and it becomes useful scenes shift fast. A textile mill, actually a wool extrusion plant, uses timed blasts to fluff and braid raw wool into carpets. The texture is tactile. You can almost feel the blocky nap under your palm, hear the snap of fibers. The camera zooms to a worker threading a spindle when a tiny controlled detonation lifts the strand 3 blocks up and sets it down in a neat coil. The worker laughs, half terror, half delight. A narwhal-shaped banner flutters outside proclaiming made by Boom. Even the art school adopts TNT. Sculptors carve statues by strategic detonations, creating angular busts with a satisfying crumble. The art critic, a thin, monocled villager, declares it is destructive, therefore it is modern. Not every invention is purely functional. There is a short-lived craze for TNT-powered kitchens. Chefs stand before explosive stoves, timing blasts to a percussion rhythm that crisps pork chops and vaporizes potion residues. One unfortunate soufflé learns gravity and never forgives it. The culinary pioneers wear chef hats that double as blast shields. Dining becomes a theater. Timed explosions send steaks flying into waiting bread bowls. A child swoops in midair and shouts, "Catch," and catches dinner like a practiced trapeze artist. The critics call it dangerous deliciousness. With new machines come new jobs and a strange reordering of society. Guilds form. The Blasters Consortium, the Knucklebone Engineers, the Redstone Union. Apprentices learn to read a fuse like a language. Education is practical and loud. Schools have signin boards and safety posters. Think before you ignite next to a poster of a smiling creeper who, oddly, looks proud to be part of industry. The professor inaugurates a technical college where students sculpt timing circuits out of redstone repeaters and priority queues out of TNT crates. Exams involve synchronized detonations and a strict rubric. Precision, efficiency, minimal collateral sheep economics recalibrates in amusing ways. TNT costs pegged to charcoal, cobblestone, and a municipal tax called the Boom Levy. Farmers trade pumpkins for fuses. A banker, square glasses glittering, holds a ledger where assets are measured in blast credits. Investments are literally explosive. Venture capitalists crowd workshops, shouting, "Scale the blast. Optimize the boom." A comedic montage shows financiers in suits made of wool, nervously adjusting detonators while nodding at charts that graph boom-to-block ratio. Somewhere in the background, a redstone lamp flickers like a skeptical eyebrow. But chaos is never far from order. There are learning curves. An early textile plant accidentally flings a bale of wool across the town square and plasters the mayor into a fluffy monument. He emerges bewildered. covered in pastel wool, and size, this is industry. Another day, a conveyor jam starts a chain reaction where a stack of TNT blocks, like dominoes, tumbles and creates a pop art landscape of holes and twine. The professor prescribes mindfulness meditation for engineers, followed by recalibration sessions. He insists on meticulous blueprints and an oddly strict set of etiquette around the sacred moment of ignition twists reveal themselves in small, absurd ways. Creatures adapt. Creepers, once solitary ambush artists, find gainful employment as mobile demolition assistants and unionize for hazard pay. Zombies start day shift jobs because night shift was too spooky. Even the Endermen, notorious for moving blocks randomly, are recruited as fickle logistics workers. They rearrange inventory in ways that are both infuriating and strangely efficient. An Enderman in a safety vest misplaces a crate of TNT, and the town learns the ancient virtue of labels. A sign goes up. Please do not stare at the inventory. Social rituals mutate around explosion. Weddings include a ceremonial detonation that sends flower petals and obsidian confetti into the air. Baptisms are performed with a single, blessed pop that politely transfigures newborns' baby blankets into heirloom swaddles. Funerals are quieter. A respectful, tiny fizz commemorates the departed, and villagers scatter redstone dust like salt. Rituals become compressed into milliseconds of bright light, and community attachment shifts to a synchronized sense of belonging. We detonate together, therefore we are together. Underneath the laughter and the spectacle, a more serious experimentation takes place. Workshops test controlled blast shapes. Engineers craft TNT geometries to hollow out mines with dizzying efficiency while leaving structural pillars intact. The camera lingers on a lattice of negative space, an underground cathedral carved by explosions, with stalactites shaped like cubes of glittering stone. In one intimate scene, Professor Spark kneels in the glow of a freshly blasted cavern. Dust motes like tiny suns suspended in the air, and he places a single torch on a wall. His voice, softer now, admits that for all its bluster, TNT is a tool that demands respect. It gives, he says, and sometimes it takes in ways we did not yet calculate. At moments, the universe refuses to be efficient. Nature pushes back. Rivers reroute themselves around factories, carrying ash and tiny cubes of slag downstream. Trees grow back in odd, blunted profiles, their leaves singed into square spectrums. Some villagers take to planting gardens of TN-resistant flora, which bloom like tiny green shields. A comedic animal subplot emerges. Chickens develop the curious habit of laying eggs shaped suspiciously like mini TNT blocks, and nobody can agree if this is mutation or marketing. The part closes on a double image. A panoramic shot of the town at dusk, lit by the measured glow of factory chimneys and the twinkle of lanterns, and a close-up of Professor Spark's hands, smudged with soot and holding a tiny model factory. He turns the model miniature pistons twitch. He smiles, both proud and a little weary. The narration grows reflective and wry. They have harnessed a force usually reserved for catastrophe and turned it into a rhythm, a mode of life. But the rhythm keeps a beat of unpredictability, an offset time signature that promises both innovation and mischief. A child tosses a spark into a puddle, and the splash looks like a star. The professor watches that splash and knows the next chapter will ask harder questions about safety, scale, and whether the soul of a town can be measured in blasts. He taps the model thoughtfully. "We are learning to be careful," he murmurs. Careful enough to be reckless in a useful way. The light of the factories lingers as the scene fades, an ironic lullaby for a town that sleeps to the cadence of explosions, and the camera pulls back with a promise. The revolution is noisy, it is messy, and it is only beginning. The sky above the factory district glows like a fuse, orange, square, and impossibly calm. As Professor Brickwell tips his cobblestone hat and gestures to a conveyor of ticking TNT like a proud conductor. This is not the melancholic soot-dark industrial age historians once imagined. It is loud, blocky, and pleasantly explosive. The clouds are pixelated puffs. The river runs in perfect right angles, and every explosion leaves a tidy crater with a small, polite plume. The Industrial Revolution in Minecraft is not soot and smoke, but sparkle and kaboom. And Brickwell, with a monocle made from a polished redstone torch, narrates the whole operation like a nature documentary about particularly ambitious fireworks cut to a low angle. A line of iron golems in leather aprons, their fists rhythmically slamming pressure plates. Each slam triggers a redstone pulse, a piston size, and a block of TNT rolls forward, aligned like dominoes at a factory parade. Short, efficient sparks. The smell, if you could smell pixels, is warm gunpowder, sugar, and freshly cut oak. Villagers in goggles clap as a cart loaded with dynamite clanks away on rails. The scene has the music of industry. Ticking, popping, a jaunty honk when creepers pass by on the subway shift. Brickwell moves through a cavernous hall where furnaces glow and TNT pallets are stacked like crates of oranges. He points out the genius: controlled combustion as raw energy. A comically oversized lever labeled safety sits next to a sign, pull only for dramatic effect. Brickwell's voice grows solemn, documentary deep. They discovered that TNT, when timed and channeled, produces immense kinetic output. Pistons, mills, gearboxes, all dance to the detonations. He taps a model of a textile mill. A gust of blocky wind unfurls bolts of wool into neat rolls, each explosion measured to the millisecond. A sheep applauds, scene hop. The camera follows a tiny blue-redstone spark into an engine room. Here, TNT goes through a surprisingly elegant choreography. A clockwork of droppers and hoppers feed gunpowder pellets into a central ignition chamber. Redstone comparators blink like beady insect eyes. A villager technician wipes soot off his blocky brow, an ironic phrase in a world made of cubes, and mutters, "Steady, steady." His voice is a comical squeak, but his hands are sure. The explosion occurs in a clean compartment, producing a puff of propulsion that turns a massive iron wheel. The wheel spins, and the factory's assembly line jolts to life, arranging pistons into furniture, minecarts into art, and engineered dirt into surprisingly modern skyscrapers of gravel and glass-beat change. The comedy intensifies with a union meeting of redstone engineers and creeper representatives. Imagine a tiny boardroom with creeper vines on the table. Brickwell moderates with a smile that's half boast and half apology. A creeper in a vest clears its throat. "We demand comfortable detonations." It hisses, a profound line delivered in 3 sibilant syllables. The crowd erupts in polite blocky applause. The twist: TNT salaries require literal compensation, more gunpowder in the lunchboxes. Brickwell negotiates. He offers benefits: helmets, blast-proof boots, and extra cake when the explosions are particularly efficient. Everyone grins, even the creeper looks only slightly less ready to explode. Cut. A montage of factories innovating. TNT-powered looms that weave patterns in midair with the help of piston choreography. A bakery where measured blasts puff dough into towering loaves that explode into baguette pieces. A culinary hazard and a breakfast trend. A train with TNT engines whooshes down a track and launches minecarts into precise arcs, depositing goods into warehouses like aggressive package delivery. Each 20-second beat is a new invention and a new visual gag. A TNT clock that tells time by very small booms, a printing press that literally stamps newspapers with a celebratory pop, a lighthouse that signals ships by detonating weighted TNT into the sea, creating waves that carry packages of fish shift in tone, brief gravity. Brickwell walks past a memorial garden where tiny plaques honor the miscalculated, the workers who misjudged timing. Flowers are planted in neat cubic rows. The documentary voice narrows into reflection. There was a price, Brickwell says quietly. Innovation is rarely tidy. A twist. The dead are memorialized not with somber names, but with playful epitaphs like, "Here lies Harold. Misread the redstone." A little laugh, then a wince. The world is absurd and kind, but consequences ripple like shockwaves. Environmental effects are wryly portrayed. Rivers that stagger from small detonations, fish wearing goggles, and forests that regrow faster because saplings are launched into the sky and land like confetti next scene. Brick factories start to seek optimization. Out of comedic desperation, Brickwell invents the TNT regulator, a contraption equal parts steam engine and carnival ride. It measures, calibrates, and occasionally sneezes out a puff of powder. With this device, factories can orchestrate complex symphonies of blasts. The result, choreography. Factories put on public performances where mills, furnaces, and pistons synchronize to explosive ballets. Villagers hold programs, clap in rhythm, and drop crumbly cake. The city embraces this as culture. The phrase "going to the blast" means attending a show-short dialogue. Punch. A child watches a choreographed blast and whispers, "Boom is pretty." The simplicity cuts through the mechanical jargon and academic debates, reminding viewers that in this blocky universe, wonder is the main product. Quick cut. Trouble emerges in the form of efficiency exceeding ethics. The TNT supply chain industrializes itself. Gunpowder mines deepen into caverns where creepers are farmed with a degree of entrepreneurial awkwardness. Workers argue that mining creepers is cruel. Brickwell faces the ethical ledger. How much is progress worth? Another twist, a band of rebel miners invents an alternative. Compressed redstone batteries that store explosive energy without living creatures. The factory district splits between traditional dynamite and newfangled batteries. Brickwell is torn, tugging at his monocle and at the societal scene change. Espionage and sabotage appear as a comedic subplot. Rival inventors send minimal, polite spies to plant faulty timers. A saboteur replaces a TNT pallet with a mound of harmless dirt. When the engine room fires, it produces a dignified puff of nothing and a strongly worded letter from the union. We were promised kabooms. Industrial espionage plays out like a slapstick heist, sneaking past iron golems, bribing a villager with cake, and an awkward chase on minecarts that ends with both parties applauding the creativity beat to a quieter, human moment. Brickwell sits on a rooftop overlooking the factory skyline. Smoke is whimsical puff clouds. The moon, a perfect square, rises. He hears a distant, tiny pop, a child setting off a firework in a square backyard, a domestic echo of the industry's great detonations. He smiles with complicated pride. The narration softens. They built a world that loved to blow things up, but also a world that built things with the aftermath in mind. He counts the trusses, the rebuilt walls, the communities that organize rebuilding like a sport. The absurdity becomes a rhythm of creation and repair sudden comedic twist. A trio of sheep invent a protest art movement, woolly banners that read, "Ba for peace." They parade through the factories, blocking conveyors with soft but effective wool. Everyone pauses. The movement goes viral. Even creepers sign a petition. Brickwell, ever the showman, concocts a compromise. Safety festivals where explosions are simulated with confetti and minimal risk. The festivals become unexpectedly popular. Tourists arrive in pixelated suits, tipping hats and throwing coin-shaped emeralds like confetti. Final scene. A sweeping panorama of the industrial skyline at dawn. The factories are humming politely. Cranes, shaped like tamed creepers, gently place TNT pallets where they belong. Brickwell stands on a balconied ledge, monocle catching the first square of light. He raises a hand not to ignite but to wave. The documentary narrator lowers the tone and offers a gentle, ironic summation. In a world that learned to harness chaos with a stopwatch and a smile, progress is a conversation between risk and imagination. The factories still pop, still spark, still inspire, but now they do so with an awkward, communal sense of responsibility and a brilliant capacity for spectacle. A final, quiet beat. Brickwell turns from the ledge, and in the distance, a new blueprint unfurls across the sky, a schematics cloud for something neither fully safe nor fully dangerous. He says, thoughtfully, "We have mastered the detonation. Now we must decide what to build with it." The camera lingers on the blueprint, the edges glowing like a fuse about to be lit, and the music holds a taste of mischief. An ironic pause, and then the narration invites the viewer to wonder, if you could design the next factory, what would you make with a little controlled chaos?